In the rugged heart of Wyoming Territory, 1875, nature's fury unleashed a devastating rockslide that would forever alter two souls' destinies. Sarah Mitchell, 8 months pregnant and seeking shelter from a sudden storm, found herself trapped in Thunder Cave's crushing darkness. As the walls crumbled and hope dwindled with each passing breath, a stranger's silhouette appeared through the dusty chaos. Jack McCall, a man running from his own shadows. Without hesitation, he shielded her from falling rocks with his own body, wrapped her in his weathered coat, and whispered a promise that would echo through time. "I'll get you both out of here, or die trying." This isn't just a tale of survival against nature's wrath. It's a story of redemption, where one man's sacrifice becomes a testament to love's transformative power. Will Jack's sacrifice be enough to save not just Sarah's life, but her unborn child's future? And can love truly bloom in the darkest of places? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The worn letter, crinkled in Sarah Mitchell's pocket as she urged her horse forward through the gathering storm. 8 months of carrying new life hadn't made the journey any easier, but neither had it dampened her determination. The mountain path ahead twisted like a serpent through the Wyoming wilderness, each turn bringing her closer to Thunder Creek, where her sister Mary's ranch awaited, and with it, the promise of a new beginning. Sarah's fingers traced the edges of Thomas's last letter, memorized through countless readings since that fatal day in the Silver Peak mine. "My dearest," it began, the careful penmanship so characteristic of her late husband, "by the time you read this, I'll be heading down for my final shift." The new support beams arrived, and with them our chance at a better life. But Thomas never saw that better life. The mine collapse took him and 12 others, leaving Sarah with nothing but a small pension, a growing belly, and an unbearable weight of grief. Yet within that grief sprouted something else, a fierce determination to ensure their child would have the future Thomas had dreamed of. Thunder growled overhead, drawing Sarah's attention to the darkening sky. The spring storms in Wyoming Territory were notorious for their sudden violence, and this one had been building all afternoon. Her horse, a steady mare named Belle, nickered nervously as another rumble echoed through the canyon. "Easy, girl," Sarah murmured, patting Belle's neck. "We'll find shelter soon enough." Her hand drifted to her swollen belly, feeling the familiar flutter of movement within. The baby had been especially active today, as if sensing the approaching storm, or perhaps the impending change in their lives. Mary's last letter had been clear. "Come to Thunder Creek, Sarah. There's room enough here for you and the little one, and heaven knows I could use the help with the books." Her sister's practical nature shone through even in her written words, offering not just sanctuary but purpose. A sharp kick from the baby made Sarah smile, despite her growing unease about the weather. "You're just like your father, always restless when there's work to be done." The thought of Thomas brought both warmth and pain, a duality she'd grown accustomed to over these past months. The first heavy drops of rain began to fall, pattering against the brim of her hat. Sarah scanned the increasingly treacherous path ahead, knowing she needed to find shelter soon. The nearest town was still hours away, and Mary's ranch lay another day's ride beyond that. Through the gathering gloom, she spotted the dark mouth of a cave set into the mountainside. Thunder Cave, if she remembered the trail markers correctly. Local legend said it had once been a mining test shaft, abandoned when the silver seam proved too shallow to be worth the effort. Now it served as an occasional shelter for travelers caught in weather like this. As Sarah guided Belle toward the cave entrance, her hand brushed against Thomas's pocket watch in her skirt pocket, his other legacy, besides their unborn child. The glass was cracked, the hands frozen at 10:47, marking the exact moment the mine's supports had given way. She kept it as a reminder, not of how Thomas died, but of how he lived. Always punctual, always reliable, always putting the well-being of others before his own. Another crash of thunder, closer now, made her decision for her. "Come on, Belle," she urged, steering the nervous horse toward the cave's entrance. "Just until the storm passes." If Sarah had known what fate awaited her in Thunder Cave's depths, she might have risked the storm instead. But as Thomas used to say, God writes straight with crooked lines. And sometimes, she would later reflect, the darkest caves can lead to the brightest futures. The cave mouth yawned before Sarah, a black slash against the mountainside that seemed to swallow what little daylight remained. Belle balked at the entrance, hooves scraping against loose shale, but another violent crack of thunder convinced the mare to follow Sarah's gentle guidance. 20 feet in, Sarah's eyes caught a glint of metal in the gloom. An old mining lantern hung from a rusted nail, forgotten by some previous traveler. Her fingers, chilled by the cave's damp air, fumbled with Thomas's matches before finally catching a flame. The lantern's glow pushed back the darkness, revealing weathered support beams and walls lined with abandoned mining equipment. "Not so. Different from home," Sarah whispered, though the words brought little comfort. The Silver Peak mine had seemed safe too, until the day it wasn't. She led Belle deeper, where the passage widened into a rough chamber. Here, at least, they'd be sheltered from the storm's fury. The lantern's light danced across the cave walls, casting strange shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Old markings scratched into the rock told silent stories of hopes and disappointments, dates, names, arrows pointing to supposed silver veins that had never yielded their promised riches. A particularly loud thunderclap shook the mountain, and Sarah felt the baby stir restlessly. "Shh, little one," she soothed, rubbing her belly. "Just a storm passing through." But even as she spoke the words, something else trembled through the rock, something that had nothing to do with thunder. It started as a low vibration, more felt than heard. Belle sensed it first, ears pricking forward as she shifted nervously. Then came the sound, a deep, grinding groan from somewhere in the earth itself. Sarah's mining town upbringing screamed, a warning her conscious mind hadn't yet processed. The first rocks fell from the ceiling like deadly rain. Sarah barely had time to pull Belle away from the cave's mouth before the entrance collapsed in a deafening roar of stone and dust. The lantern swung wildly as she stumbled backward, its light creating a frenzied dance of shadows across the falling debris. When the dust finally began to settle, Sarah found herself in a nightmare she'd prayed never to experience. The cave's entrance was now sealed by a wall of fallen rock, and the air had taken on the thick, choking quality she remembered from the stories of Silver Peak's survivors. "No," she whispered, then louder. "No!" Her voice echoed mockingly back to her. Belle whinnied in distress, pulling at her reins until Sarah was forced to tie them to an old support beam. The mare's fear only amplified her own, but she couldn't afford to panic. Not now, not with the baby. Sarah held the lantern higher, searching for any gap in the fallen rocks, any hint of daylight. There was none. The collapse had been thorough, sealing them in as completely as a cork in a bottle. The realization sent a wave of dizziness through her, and she pressed her back against the cave wall, sliding down until she sat on the damp ground. The baby kicked again, more insistently this time. Sarah forced herself to take deep breaths, fighting back the terror that threatened to overwhelm her. "We'll be fine," she said aloud, as much to convince herself as to calm her unborn child. "Someone will come. They have to come." But even as she spoke, she knew the bitter truth. The storm would keep other travelers away, and Mary wasn't expecting her for another day. No one knew she had stopped at Thunder Cave. No one would know where to look. A sharp pain gripped her abdomen, different from the baby's usual movements. Sarah gasped, recognition dawning with horrifying clarity. Not now. Please, not now. But her body was already answering that desperate prayer with another contraction. The lantern's flame flickered as if sympathizing with her plight. Sarah watched, it with growing dread, knowing it was her only source of light. How long would the oil last? How long before darkness claimed this tomb she'd stumbled into? Through the settling dust and growing pain, Sarah's hand found Thomas's pocket watch. The cracked face caught the lantern light, those frozen hands still marking the moment of another cave's betrayal. Was this to be her fate too? Would their child be born into darkness, only to... A sound echoed from deeper in the cave. Footsteps, growing closer. Sarah held her breath, hope and fear warring in her heart as a shadow appeared at the edge of her lantern's reach. The footsteps halted at the edge of the lantern's glow. Sarah pressed herself against the cave wall, one hand protectively covering her belly, the other gripping the lantern like a weapon. Through the settling dust emerged a tall figure, his features shadowed beneath a worn cavalry hat. "Ma'am," his voice was rough but gentle, like water over stone. "Are you hurt?" Before Sarah could answer, another contraction seized her. The stranger closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, catching the lantern as it slipped from her grasp. In its light, she saw his face clearly for the first time, weathered, unshaven, with eyes that held equal measures of concern and wariness. "The baby!" Sarah managed through clenched teeth. "It's coming!" Something fell from the man's coat as he knelt beside her, a crumpled piece of paper that caught the lantern light. Sarah glimpsed the words, "Wanted," and a familiar face before. He snatched it away, stuffing it back into his pocket. Her blood ran cold. Everyone in the territory knew that face, had seen it posted in every sheriff's office from Cheyenne to Deadwood. Jack McCall, the Ghost Rider. 5 banks robbed, 2 men dead, and a bounty that could buy a small ranch. He saw the recognition in her eyes, saw the fear replace pain for one crucial moment. His shoulders slumped slightly, but he didn't move. "Away. I know what you're thinking, ma'am, and you're right about who I am. But right now that doesn't matter. What matters is getting you and your little one out of here alive." Another contraction racked Sarah's body. Jack's hands were surprisingly gentle as he helped her into a more comfortable position, his own wanted poster forgotten in his coat pocket. The lantern cast his shadow large against the cave wall, a dark guardian in their stone prison. "Why?" Sarah gasped when the pain subsided. "Why help me?" Jack was quiet for a moment, checking the stability of the nearest support beam. "Maybe because I'm tired of being the man on that poster. Maybe because my own mama died in childbirth, alone in a place not too different from this." He turned to face her, and in his eyes Sarah saw something that didn't belong in a wanted man's gaze. Hope. Or maybe because God sometimes gives a man one last chance to do something right. A deep rumble echoed through the cave, and fresh debris rained down from above. Jack moved with surprising speed, shielding Sarah with his body as rocks clattered. Around them, when the dust settled, he was bleeding from a cut above his eye, but his focus remained on her. "That entrance is blocked solid," he said, wiping blood from his face. "But I've been hiding out in these caves for 2 weeks. There's another way out through the old mining tunnels? It's dangerous, but—" "No," Sarah interrupted, gripping his arm as another contraction began. "The baby. It's too soon. I can't move." Jack looked between her and the unstable cave ceiling, calculation warring with compassion on his features. Finally, he shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth of it enveloped Sarah, carrying the scent of leather, tobacco, and spring rain. "Then we make our stand right here, Mum." He settled beside her, close enough to help, but far enough to seem proper. "I've got some medical knowledge, picked it up from a Cherokee healer who patched me up after a disagreement with some lawmen." A particularly strong contraction drew a cry from Sarah's lips. Jack's hand found hers, strong and steady, and she gripped it without thinking about whose hand it was. In that moment, he wasn't the Ghost Rider or a wanted man. He was simply someone choosing to help when help was needed most. "I know you've got no reason to trust me," Jack said softly, "but I swear on my mama's grave, I'll see you and your child safe or die in the trying." Sarah looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception. She found none. Instead, she saw the same determination she'd seen in Thomas's eyes the day he'd promised to build them a better life. Different men, different promises, but that same unwavering resolve. Above them the mountain groaned again, a reminder that their time might be measured in minutes rather than hours. Jack squeezed her hand once before releasing it, rising to secure the lantern higher on the wall. Its light caught the silver handle of a revolver at his hip, a weapon that had likely taken lives, now in the hands of a man determined to save one. "Well, little lady," he said, managing a smile that transformed his entire face, "seems like we've got ourselves quite a story in the making." The letter in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with each step toward the cave's mouth, as if Thomas's last words were pulling her forward into destiny's embrace. "Take care of our little one," he had written, "and remember that love, like silver, can be found in the most unexpected places." Sarah Mitchell had no way of knowing just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The footsteps halted at the edge of the lantern's glow. Sarah pressed herself against the cave wall, one hand protectively covering her belly, the other gripping the lantern like a weapon. Through the settling dust emerged a tall figure, his features shadowed beneath a worn cavalry hat. "Ma'am," his voice was rough but gentle, like water over stone. "Are you hurt?" Before Sarah could answer, another contraction seized her. The stranger closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, catching the lantern as it slipped from her grasp. In its light, she saw his face clearly for the first time, weathered, unshaven, with eyes that held equal measures of concern and wariness. "The baby," Sarah managed through clenched teeth. "It's coming." Something fell from the man's coat as he knelt beside her, a crumpled piece of paper that caught the lantern light. Sarah glimpsed the words, "Wanted," and a familiar face before. He snatched it away, stuffing it back into his pocket. Her blood ran cold. Everyone in the territory knew that face, had seen it posted in every sheriff's office from Cheyenne to Deadwood. Jack McCall, the Ghost Rider. 5 banks robbed, 2 men dead, and a bounty that could buy a small ranch. He saw the recognition in her eyes, saw the fear replace pain for one crucial moment. His shoulders slumped slightly, but he didn't move. "Away. I know what you're thinking, ma'am, and you're right about who I am. But right now that doesn't matter. What matters is getting you and your little one out of here alive." Another contraction racked Sarah's body. Jack's hands were surprisingly gentle as he helped her into a more comfortable position, his own wanted poster forgotten in his coat pocket. The lantern cast his shadow large against the cave wall, a dark guardian in their stone prison. "Why?" Sarah gasped when the pain subsided. "Why help me?" Jack was quiet for a moment, checking the stability of the nearest support beam. "Maybe because I'm tired of being the man on that poster. Maybe because my own mama died in childbirth, alone in a place not too different from this." He turned to face her, and in his eyes Sarah saw something that didn't belong in a wanted man's gaze: hope. Or maybe because God sometimes gives a man one last chance to do something right. A deep rumble echoed through the cave, and fresh debris rained down from above. Jack moved with surprising speed, shielding Sarah with his body as rocks clattered. Around them, when the dust settled, he was bleeding from a cut above his eye, but his focus remained on her. "That entrance is blocked solid," he said, wiping blood from his face. "But I've been hiding out in these caves for 2 weeks. There's another way out through the old mining tunnels? It's dangerous, but—" "No," Sarah interrupted, gripping his arm as another contraction began. "The baby. It's too soon. I can't move." Jack looked between her and the unstable cave ceiling, calculation warring with compassion on his features. Finally, he shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth of it enveloped Sarah, carrying the scent of leather, tobacco, and spring rain. "Then we make our stand right here, Mum." He settled beside her, close enough to help, but far enough to seem proper. "I've got some medical knowledge, picked it up from a Cherokee healer who patched me up after a disagreement with some lawmen." A particularly strong contraction drew a cry from Sarah's lips. Jack's hand found hers, strong and steady, and she gripped it without thinking about whose hand it was. In that moment, he wasn't the Ghost Rider or a wanted man. He was simply someone choosing to help when help was needed most. "I know you've got no reason to trust me," Jack said softly, "but I swear on my mama's grave, I'll see you and your child safe or die in the trying." Sarah looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception. She found none. Instead, she saw the same determination she'd seen in Thomas's eyes the day he'd promised to build them a better life. Different men, different promises, but that same unwavering resolve. Above them, the mountain groaned again, a reminder that their time might be measured in minutes rather than hours. Jack squeezed her hand, once before releasing it, rising to secure the lantern higher on the wall. Its light caught the silver handle of a revolver at his hip, a weapon that had likely taken lives, now in the hands of a man determined to save one. "Well, little lady," he said, managing a smile that transformed his entire face. "Seems like we've got ourselves quite a story in the making." Jack's coat around Sarah's shoulders grew heavier with the cave's dampness, but its warmth remained, a barrier against more than just the cold. She watched as he moved methodically through their stone prison, testing walls, checking support, beams, his every movement speaking of a man accustomed to calculating odds and finding exits. "The main shaft's completely blocked," he reported, returning to her side, "and that last shake loosened the ceiling supports. We've got maybe 6 hours before they give way entirely." He kept his voice steady, but Sarah had grown up around enough miners to read the gravity in his expression. "And the other way out? Through the mining tunnels?" Jack crouched beside her, pulling out a worn tobacco pouch. Instead of tobacco, it contained a small supply of dried herbs. "Cherokee medicine," he explained, crushing some leaves between his fingers. "For the pain. But before you take any, you should know those tunnels are treacherous, even for someone who's not 8 months gone with child." Another contraction seized Sarah, stronger than the last. Jack's hand found hers again, and she squeezed it until the pain subsided. The herbs he offered smelled of mint and something sharper, unfamiliar. "How did you really learn medicine?" she asked, accepting the herbs. "Was it truly from the Cherokee?" A shadow passed over Jack's face. "Part truth, part lie, like most. And things in my life." He settled against the cave wall beside her, close enough to help, but maintaining a respectful distance. "I studied with a proper doctor once before the war changed everything." The lantern light flickered, throwing strange shadows across their faces. Sarah studied his profile, trying to reconcile the gentle hands that helped her through. Contractions with the notorious outlaw from the wanted poster. "The war changed a lot of men," she offered quietly, "some more than others." Jack's fingers traced absent patterns in the cave dust. "Some of us came back to find we didn't fit in the world anymore. Started looking for something, excitement, purpose, revenge. Took me years to realize I was looking for redemption instead." A deep rumble interrupted them, sending a shower of pebbles pattering down from above. Jack's coat was around Sarah. Before she could blink, his body shielding her as he had promised. When the rumbling subsided, neither moved immediately. Sarah could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, belying the danger of their situation. "Why this cave?" she asked, partly to distract herself from another building contraction, partly because something in his earlier words nagged at her. "You said you've been hiding here for 2 weeks. Why?" Jack pulled back slightly, reaching into his shirt to withdraw a folded paper. Not the wanted poster this time, but a newspaper clipping. In the lantern light, Sarah could make out a headline about a bank robbery in Cheyenne. "Because what that poster doesn't say is that the last bank I robbed back." His voice was barely above a whisper. $20,000, stolen from honest farmers by a corrupt bank manager. I took it back, left it on the sheriff's doorstep with proof of the manager's crimes. Been hiding out ever since, waiting for the right moment to slip away, start fresh somewhere. The pain came again, harder this time. Sarah gripped Jack's arm, breathing through the contraction as he'd shown her. When it passed, she found him watching her with a mixture of concern and something else, something that looked remarkably like hope. "My husband," she managed. "He always said there's no such thing as a man who's all bad or all good. Said we're all just trying to find our way home." Sounds like a wise man. He was. Sarah touched Thomas's pocket watch through her dress. "And he'd be the first to say that redemption isn't something you find, it's something you choose." Every day, with every action, Jack's response was cut short by another ominous crack from above. A support beam groaned, wood splintering under the mountain's weight. Their time was running out faster than either had anticipated. "Mrs. Mitchell," Jack said formally, standing to survey their deteriorating shelter, "I believe it's time to make a choice of our own. We can stay here, hope for rescue, and likely be buried alive. Or we can try for the tunnels, risk everything, but at least die under our own power." He extended his hand to her, the gesture both a question and a promise. Sarah looked at it, remembering another hand extended to her in another time, Thomas, helping her up after she'd fallen, smiling as he said, "Trust me." The mountain groaned again, and Sarah made her choice. Sarah's small Bible fell from her pocket as Jack helped her to her feet, its worn leather binding catching the lantern light. He retrieved it carefully, noting the family history inscribed on its yellowed pages before returning it to her. "Mitchell Family Bible," she explained, tucking it safely away. 5 generations of births, deaths, and marriages. It's all I have left of home. They made their way deeper into the cave, Jack supporting most of her weight between contractions. Belle followed reluctantly, her hooves clicking against stone in a nervous rhythm. The mining tunnels branched off like dark arteries, each one holding its own dangers and possibilities. "My father was a preacher," Jack said unexpectedly, holding the lantern higher to examine tunnel markings. "He'd quote scripture while teaching. Me to read, said education was the only inheritance he could offer. What happened to him? Influenza, winter of '62. I was serving under Grant at the time. Couldn't make it back for the funeral." His voice carried old pain. "By the time I returned home, everything had changed. Or maybe I had." Another contraction seized Sarah, stronger than before. Jack eased her against the wall, his hands steady as he timed the pain's duration. In the lantern's glow, she saw scars on his knuckles, a fighter's hands now turned to healing. "Tell me about your husband," Jack said once the contraction passed, clearly trying to distract her. "The wise man who saw good in everyone." Sarah touched Thomas's watch again, drawing strength from its familiar shape. "He was a mining engineer, believed technology and progress could make the work safer, prevent tragedies. The very thing that killed him, those new support beams, they were his idea. They worked perfectly in every other shaft. Fate's got a cruel sense of humor sometimes." Thomas would have disagreed. He'd say fate's just life's way of steering us where we need to go, even if we can't see the path ahead. Jack considered this as he studied the tunnel formations. Like now, 2 strangers trapped in a mountain, one running from the law, one running toward a new life. Maybe. Sarah managed a small smile despite another building contraction. "Though, Thomas might say you're running toward something too, even if you don't know it yet." Their conversation was interrupted by a distant rumble. Dust and small rocks showered down, and Belle whinnied in fear. Jack's arm went around Sarah protectively, pulling her close as debris rained around them. "We need to move faster," he said when the rumbling subsided. "That collapse is spreading through the mountain. These old tunnels won't hold much longer." Sarah nodded, though each step was becoming more difficult. The baby seemed to sense their predicament, moving restlessly within her. Jack's coat, still draped around her shoulders, caught on rough stone as they navigated the narrow passages. "This way?" Jack pointed toward a tunnel marked with faded arrows. "Miners would have used this as an escape route. It should lead to—" A sharp crack interrupted him. The tunnel ahead collapsed in a thunderous cascade of rock, cutting off their planned escape route. Jack pulled Sarah back just in time, shielding her with his body as dust and debris filled the air. When the dust settled, they found themselves faced with a grim choice: retreat to their original chamber or try the unmarked tunnel to their left. Sarah's next contraction answered for them. There would be no going back. "The unmarked tunnel, then," Jack said, adjusting his grip on the lantern. "Sometimes the best paths are the ones that aren't marked on any map." Sarah touched her Bible through her pocket, thinking of all the family history recorded within. Births, deaths, and the spaces between where life's real stories played out. Like redemption. Jack's eyes met hers in the lantern light, understanding passing between them. Exactly like redemption, Mrs. Mitchell. Exactly like redemption. Together, they turned toward the unknown tunnel, their shadows merging on the cave wall behind them. A preacher's son turned outlaw and a widow carrying new life, finding their way through the mountain's dark heart, guided by faith, necessity, and perhaps something more. The unmarked tunnel narrowed as they pressed forward, the rough walls pressing in around them like a closing fist. Sarah's labor pains were coming faster now, each contraction stronger than the last. Jack guided her carefully, one hand supporting her elbow, the other holding the lantern high. When the next pain hit, it brought Sarah to her knees. Jack was there instantly, his medicine pouch already in hand. The small leather bag, decorated with faded Cherokee beadwork, contained their last hope for managing the increasingly difficult birth. "My mother," he said, measuring out herbs with practiced care. "She died bringing my sister into the world. I was 12, old enough to understand, but too young to help. The Cherokee medicine man who tried to save them taught me everything he knew after that. Said knowledge was a way of honoring their memory." Sarah accepted the herbs, their bitter taste cutting through the pain. "Did your sister survive?" "No." Jack's voice was soft, almost lost in the cave's darkness. "But others have. Because of what I learned. Funny how life works. My worst day led to saving lives instead of taking them." Another contraction seized Sarah, this one lasting nearly a minute. When it passed, she found herself clutching Jack's shirt, her face pressed against the rough fabric. He didn't pull away. "The baby's coming fast now," he said, his tone professional but gentle. "We need to find a safe place to stop. These herbs will help with the pain, but they won't slow things." "Down!" They moved forward again, slower now. Belle followed faithfully, her presence a comfort in the oppressive darkness beyond their lantern's reach. The tunnel widened suddenly into a small chamber, and Jack raised the light to reveal old mining equipment scattered about. "This might be our best chance," he said, already shrugging off his vest to make a clean space for Sarah. "The supports here are newer, and there's more airflow. Feel it." A cool breeze touched Sarah's face, carrying the faint scent of pine. Somewhere above, the mountain had cracked enough to let in fresh air. It was both encouraging and terrifying. The same cracks that provided air could bring the whole mountain down on them. Jack helped her settle against the wall, then began examining the chamber more thoroughly. His hands moved with quiet efficiency as he gathered what they might need. A relatively clean piece of canvas, some wooden splints that could serve as tools, a tin cup for water. "You've done this before," Sarah observed between pains. It wasn't a question. 3 times. Jack dampened a cloth with water from his canteen. 2 boys and a girl, all healthy. Their mothers too. He paused, testing the strength of a support beam. "Last one was the wife of a man hunting me. She went into labor while he was out searching the hills. Never told him who helped bring his son into the world." The irony of it drew a laugh from Sarah, quickly transformed into a groan as another contraction wrapped around her like iron bands. Jack's hands were there, strong and sure, helping her breathe through it. "Tell me about the baby's father," he said when the pain eased. "Tell me about Thomas." Sarah clutched Thomas's pocket watch, its familiar weight anchoring her to the memory. "He loved numbers, said everything in the world could be measured, calculated, made safer through proper engineering, even fell in love with me through mathematics, taught me bookkeeping for the mine office." Sounds like a good man. The best. Sarah's voice caught as another contraction began building. "He would have been such a wonderful father." Jack's hands stilled for a moment. "He still will be, through you, through his child. Some legacies don't need the father present to take root and grow." The truth of his words was lost in the wave of pain that followed. This contraction was different, an overwhelming pressure that made Sarah cry out. Jack checked her condition quickly, his expression shifting from concern to focused determination. "The baby's coming now," he said, reaching for his medicine pouch. "No more walking, no more waiting. Whatever happens next happens right here." He pulled a string of beads from the pouch. Prayer beads, Sarah realized, though whether they Were Catholic or Cherokee, she couldn't tell. Jack wrapped them around her hand, then covered both with his own. "My mother's," he explained softly. "They helped bring me into this world. Seems right they should help welcome your little one too." Above them, the mountain groaned again. But in that moment, surrounded by stone and darkness, Sarah felt something else, the steady presence of a man who'd walked through his own darkness and emerged carrying light for others. A man seeking redemption, not through grand gestures, but through small acts of grace. The next contraction came like a tidal wave, and Sarah gripped the prayer beads tight as she prepared to bring new life into their precarious sanctuary. A glint of metal caught Jack's eye as he prepared for the birth. An old rock hammer, its wooden handle worn smooth by years of use. He retrieved it quickly, recognizing a potential tool for survival, even as he focused on the more immediate crisis at hand. "Something's wrong," Sarah gasped between contractions. Her face had grown pale, the prayer beads cutting into her palm. As she gripped them, "The baby, it doesn't feel right." Jack checked her condition again, his expression carefully neutral. But Sarah had grown up around miners. She knew how to read the tension in a man's shoulders when he discovered something dangerous. "The baby's turned," he finally admitted. "Breech birth. Difficult, but not impossible." He picked up the rock hammer, testing its weight. "But first we need to try something. That airflow we felt, it's coming from somewhere. Might be our best chance at getting help." Another contraction seized Sarah before she could respond. Jack supported her through it, counting the seconds silently. Too long, too strong, too close together. They were running out of time. "I can't move," Sarah managed when the pain subsided. "You'll have to go alone." "No." Jack's response was immediate, final. "I made a promise, but maybe—" He studied the chamber's ceiling, where the fresh air whispered through unseen cracks. "Maybe we can make enough noise to be heard from above." He stood, rock hammer in hand, and began tapping the ceiling methodically. To Sarah's mining-trained ear, it was immediately recognizable. The old miner's distress code. 3 short taps, 3 long, 3 short. SOS in the language of the mountain. Tap, 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 tap. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed through the chamber, a desperate Morse code prayer thrown against stone and hope. Jack moved methodically, testing different spots, listening for changes in the rock's resonance that might indicate a thinner section. Sarah watched him work between contractions, noting how his outlaw's instincts served them now. The way he checked sightlines, calculated angles, moved with quiet efficiency. The rock hammer's rhythmic tapping became a counterpoint to her labor pains, as if the mountain itself were keeping time with her body's demands. "Tell me," she said, needing distraction from the growing pressure, "about the last bank. The one you robbed back." Jack's tapping paused for a moment. "Man named Henderson ran it. Respectable on the surface, but he'd been foreclosing on farms, claiming notes were in default when they weren't. Found his ledger, saw how he'd been doctoring the numbers. Tap, 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 tap. Didn't plan to rob it. Was actually casing it for the usual reasons. But I saw a widow trying to save her farm. Henderson laughed her out of the bank. She had all her papers in order, but he'd altered the records." Another contraction gripped Sarah. Jack set down the hammer, helping. Breathed through it before resuming his work. "Reminded me of my mother, trying to save our farm after father died. Bank took it anyway, so I watched Henderson, learned his routine, found where he kept the real ledger, then I waited." The rock hammer's rhythm faltered as he reached a particularly promising spot. The airflow was stronger here, the rock's sound different. Took the money and the ledger both, left them with the sheriff along with proof of Henderson's schemes. Man's in jail now and the farms are safe. But, he smiled grimly, lot of people saw me during the robbery, hence the poster. A thief with a conscience. Sarah managed through gritted teeth as another contraction built. More like a sinner seeking grace. Jack set down the hammer, checking her progress again. His expression grew more concerned. "The baby's heart rate is strong, but this position... Sarah, we might need to..." A deep rumble cut him off, not from above this time, but from the tunnel they'd entered through. The sound of falling rock filled the darkness beyond their chamber. When the dust settled, they found their retreat cut off. The rock hammer felt heavier in Jack's hand now, its promise of rescue mocking them as their options dwindled. "Well," he said quietly, "looks like we do this the hard way." He set the hammer aside and began preparing the medical supplies from his pouch. "Your Thomas was right about one thing. Sometimes fate steers us where we need to go. Just never figured it'd steer me to playing doctor in the heart of a mountain." Sarah gripped the prayer beads tighter as the next contraction began to build. "If we survive this," she whispered, "remind me to tell you about how Thomas proposed, in a mine shaft of all places." "When we survive this," Jack corrected gently, his hands steady as he worked. "When, not if." In the flickering lantern light, Sarah's wedding ring caught the glow as she gripped Jack's hand through another contraction. The simple gold band seemed to hold all the weight of her past, even as her future hung precariously in the balance. "Tell me about that proposal," Jack said when the pain subsided, his voice gentle as he checked her progress. "The one in the mine shaft." Sarah's laugh was weak but genuine. Thomas had it all planned out. New silver vein they'd discovered. He was going to propose right where the ore first showed. But his lantern went out halfway down the shaft. She paused, breathing through the building pressure of another contraction. Jack squeezed her hand, anchoring her to the present even as her mind drifted to the past. We were in complete darkness. He was fumbling for matches, apologizing for ruining the moment. Then he said, her voice caught. He said, "Sometimes life's most precious things are found in the darkest places, proposed right there, in the black, without even a ring to show." "Sounds like he understood something about faith," Jack observed, dampening a cloth to wipe her forehead. "What about you?" Sarah asked, studying his face in the lantern light. "Were you ever married?" Jack's hands stilled for a moment. "Once, before the war. Mary was her name." He resumed his work, but his voice had grown distant. "She waited 2 years for news after Gettysburg. I was in a prison camp, couldn't get word out. By the time I made it home, she'd moved on, died. Influenza, same as my father." He managed a sad smile. "Seems like all my stories end with people leaving. Maybe that's why I started leaving first." Another contraction interrupted them, stronger than before. When it passed, Sarah found herself clutching her wedding ring, the metal warm from her grip. "Thomas used to say that endings are just beginnings. We don't understand yet," she said softly. "Wise man, you're Thomas." Jack checked the baby's position. Again, his expression growing more concerned. "This little one's still breech, and the cord—" He hesitated. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. If it comes down to a choice, save the baby," she said without hesitation. "That's not your decision to make. I'm making it anyway." Sarah's voice was firm, despite her exhaustion. "Promise me, Jack. Promise me you'll save my child." Jack met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Finally he nodded. "I promise. But you're going to promise me something too. You're going to fight. With everything you have, you fight. Deal?" "Deal." Sarah's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally now. "Jack, if something does happen, there's a letter in my Bible for the baby. Would you make sure?" "Nothing's going to happen," he interrupted, but his grip on her hand tightened. "But yes, I'll make sure, and I'll make sure your sister knows how brave you were, how you never gave up." The lantern flickered, its oil running low. Jack noticed and quickly adjusted the wick, buying them a little more time before darkness claimed them completely. "You know what's strange?" Sarah said, watching the flame dance. "I'm not afraid anymore. Not really. Maybe Thomas was right about the dark. Maybe it does show us what matters most." Jack touched the prayer bead still wrapped around her hand. "My mother used to say, fear's just faith that's lost its way home. Maybe that's what all this is about, finding our way back to something real." A particularly strong contraction seized Sarah then, drawing a cry that echoed through the chamber. When it passed, she found herself in Jack's arms, his coat still around her shoulders, his strength holding her together as her body threatened to tear apart. "Jack," she whispered. "Against his shirt. If we don't make it, we're making it," he said firmly. "Both of you. Sometimes God sends angels to guard us. Sometimes he sends outlaws. Either way, you're not facing this alone." The lantern sputtered, throwing wild shadows across the cave walls. In its dying light, Sarah saw Jack's face change, tension replacing tenderness as he monitored her condition. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying the weight of medical certainty, "it's time. The baby's coming now, ready or not, and we're going to need every bit of that faith you mentioned." She gripped his hand, and the prayer beads both, preparing for what was to come. Above them, the mountain groaned, a sound like destiny shifting. Its weight. The canteen made a hollow sound when Jack shook it, barely a cup of water left between them. He measured out a careful sip for Sarah, who lay exhausted from the latest round of contractions. The lantern's flame had shrunk to a sickly flicker, casting more shadows than light. "How bad is it?" Sarah asked, reading the concern in his movements. "Which part?" Jack tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. "The water, the light, the air, or the baby still being breech?" "All of it. Tell me true, Jack, I'm not made of glass." He settled beside her, checking the prayer beads that had left marks in her palm from gripping them so tightly. "Water's almost gone. Lantern's got maybe an hour left. Air's getting thinner. You've probably noticed the headache. And the baby—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The cord's wrapped in a way I don't like. We need to move fast, but moving fast with a breech birth could kill us both," Sarah finished. When Jack started to protest, she squeezed his hand. "Remember, not made of glass." Another contraction took her then, the worst yet. Jack supported her through it, counting the seconds silently. Too long. Everything about this was taking too long. "Tell me something," Sarah gasped when she could speak again. "Something true. Something you've never told anyone." Jack dampened the cloth with their precious remaining water, wiping her face gently. "Why?" "Because if these are my last hours, I want them filled with truth. And because—" she caught her breath as another pain built, "because you need to practice being honest if you're going to have a proper fresh start after this." The lantern sputtered, and Jack busied himself adjusting the wick before answering. "The bank robbery, the one where I took back the stolen money, that wasn't the first time I'd tried to go straight." He reached for the canteen, allowing himself the smallest sip. 2 years ago, I turned myself into a sheriff in Colorado, had it all planned out, was going to serve my time, make things right. But when I got to his office, Jack's voice grew distant. He had a wife, 2 young children. Someone had warned them I was coming. They were terrified. What happened? I walked away. Couldn't bear seeing that fear in the little one's eyes. Realized then that maybe some stains don't wash out, no matter how much you scrub. Sarah's hand found his in the dimness. "Or maybe you were waiting for the right reason to try again." A sharp crack from above interrupted them. Jack moved instantly, shielding Sarah as debris rained down. When the dust settled, they found the chamber's ceiling had dropped visibly lower. "Running out of time," Jack muttered, checking the support beams. The wood groaned under the increasing pressure, and the air grew noticeably thinner. "Sarah, we need to—" He turned to find her unnaturally still, her face pale in the dying light. The prayer beads had slipped from her limp fingers. "Sarah," his hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking her pulse, her breathing. Both were present but weak. "Sarah, wake up. You promised to fight, remember?" Her eyes fluttered open, but her gaze was unfocused. "The baby can't feel—" Jack checked her condition quickly, his worst fears confirmed. The breech position. Combined with the cord's placement, he had minutes, not hours, to make a decision that would haunt him either way. "Sarah," he gripped her shoulders gently but firmly, "listen to me. That promise you made me make, about saving the baby if I had to choose, I need you to take it back. Right now." "No." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, because you're—" Thomas was right about finding precious things in the dark, but he was right about something else too. About choices, about making things safer through proper— Jack's voice caught. Through proper engineering. Sarah's eyes focused slightly. What do you mean? Jack reached for his medical pouch, removing the last of his supplies. There's a Cherokee technique. Dangerous. But it might let me reposition the baby. It would be painful, maybe worse than painful, and I've only ever seen it done once. But if it works, then maybe no one has to break their promise today. The lantern dimmed further, and the mountain groaned above them. Jack held the canteen to Sarah's lips, letting her take the last sip of water. Your choice, he said quietly, but whatever you decide, we decide together. No more sacrificing one life for another. Not here, not now. Sarah's hand found the prayer beads again as another contraction began to build. In the fading light, she met Jack's gaze and made her choice. As Jack prepared for the procedure, his hand brushed against something metal pinned inside his shirt, a deputy's badge he'd taken from a man he'd once saved, a reminder of the path not taken. He unpinned it now, studying its tarnished surface in the failing light. The man who taught me this, he said, setting the badge aside, was called Standing Bear. He saved my life after a bullet wound went bad. Said sometimes healing means causing pain first, that you have to trust both the healer and the person being healed. Sarah nodded weakly, her fingers still wrapped around the prayer beads. I trust you, Jack. Those 3 words hit him harder than any bullet ever had. He swallowed hard, then began laying out what he'd need, the last of the herbs, strips torn from his cleanest shirt, the tin cup with their remaining water. This was originally a warrior's technique, he explained, keeping his voice steady as he worked. For setting bones broken in battle, Standing Bear adapted it for difficult births. He positioned himself carefully. I'll need to move the baby, using pressure points. It will hurt, probably worse than the contractions. Tell me about Standing Bear, Sarah gasped as another pain seized her. While you work, tell me everything. Jack began the procedure, his hands moving with deliberate precision. He found me half dead in a creek bed. Said later, he'd been watching me for days, trying to decide if I deserved saving. Never did tell me what changed his mind. Sarah's cry echoed through the chamber as he found the first pressure point. He continued working, each movement measured, each word carefully chosen to keep her focused on his voice instead of the pain. Spent 3 months in his camp, learned about medicine, about herbs, about different ways of seeing the world. He said every life has a purpose, even if we don't see it at first. Said sometimes a man has to lose everything to find what he's meant to be. Another cry from Sarah, this one cutting straight to his soul. But he felt movement, the baby responding to his efforts. The lantern sputtered again, reminding him that time was running out. The technique worked the first time I saw it, he continued, though his voice was strained now. Young mother, baby turned wrong like yours. Standing Bear saved them both, said afterward that every life saved adds meaning to our own. Sarah's hand found his arm, gripping it with surprising strength as he worked. Is that why you helped that sheriff's wife, the one whose husband was hunting you? Maybe. Jack paused, checking the baby's position. Or maybe I just couldn't stand seeing history repeat itself. My mother died because there was no one there who knew what to do. Standing Bear said that's why the spirits led him to teach me, so I could stop that story from being told again. The mountain groaned, and more debris showered down around them. Jack shielded Sarah automatically, losing precious seconds, but unwilling to risk either of them being struck. When the dust settled, he felt something different under his hands. Sarah, he said urgently, the baby's moving. I can feel it turning. But the next part, it has to be fast, and it will be the worst yet. She nodded, tears streaming down her dust-covered face. Do it. Jack took a deep breath, then began the final sequence of movements Standing Bear had taught him. Sarah's scream echoed through the chamber, surely reaching all the way to heaven itself. But beneath his hands, he felt the miracle he'd been praying for, the baby rotating into the correct position. It worked, he breathed, hardly daring to believe it. Sarah, it worked. The baby's... He looked up to find her unconscious, the prayer beads slipping from her limp fingers. The lantern chose that moment to sputter one final time, plunging them into total darkness. No, Jack growled, fumbling for his matches. Not now, not when we're so close. His fingers found the matchbox. Empty. No! In the pitch black, he could still feel the baby's position, perfect now, ready to be born. But without light, without being able to see, the irony of it struck him like a physical blow. He'd done everything right, made the impossible choice, performed a miracle, only to be defeated by darkness itself. Unless Jack's hand found the deputy's badge, its metal still warm from being carried so close to his heart. In that moment, Standing Bear's voice echoed in his memory. Sometimes, the path to light requires the greatest darkness. Sarah, he whispered, though she couldn't hear him, I'm about to break my promise about not leaving, but I swear on everything holy, I'm coming back. You hold on, both of you. Just hold on. He wrapped his coat more securely around her. Still form, tucked the badge into her hand alongside the prayer beads, and turned toward where he remembered the tunnel being. Time to find out if a man really can outrun his shadows, he muttered, and began feeling his way along the wall, heading deeper into the mountain's heart in desperate search of light. In the absolute darkness, Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the deputy's badge clutched in her hand and the rhythmic contractions of her body. The baby was coming, with or without light, to guide its way. She pressed her other hand against Jack's coat, still warm from his body, and tried to focus on his last words. Hold on. Meanwhile, Jack moved through the mountain's arteries like a man possessed, one hand trailing the rough wall, the other stretched out before him. Every mining instinct he'd learned from Standing Bear's people told him to look for changes in the air, in the rock's texture, in the subtle sounds that might indicate a way out. The tunnel branched, and he hesitated. Left or right? A wrong choice now meant death for Sarah and her child. He closed his eyes, useless in the dark anyway, and focused on feeling the air currents like Standing Bear had taught him. There, the faintest breath of fresh air from the right tunnel. He turned that way, moving faster now, despite the risk of unseen drops or obstacles. Time had become his enemy, each second ticking away in his mind like the countdown to an explosion. Back in the chamber, Sarah felt the baby's movement change. The pain was different now, more focused, more purposeful. Her body knew what to do, even if her mind was clouding over. She fumbled with the layers of her skirt, preparing as best she could in the darkness. Thomas, she whispered to the emptiness, if you're watching, now would be a good time to send help. The mountain answered with another tremor. This one, different from the others. It seemed to come from above rather than around them. Small rocks pattered down, and Sarah curled protectively around her belly, pulling Jack's coat over her head for shelter. Jack felt the tremor too, but with it came something else. A sound. Human voices, distant but real. He stopped, holding his breath to listen better. "Hello!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the tunnels. "Below! We need help!" The voices paused, then grew more excited. A faint light appeared ahead, a mining lamp, its beam weak but beautiful as sunrise to his dark, adjusted eyes. "Here!" he shouted again. "Pregnant woman in labor. Need light and rope." The rescue party moved faster now. As they drew closer, Jack recognized the lead figure, Mary Mitchell, Sarah's sister, accompanied by 3 miners with proper equipment. "Found her horse outside Thunder Cave," Mary explained quickly. "When the tremors started, no time." Jack cut her off. "She's in labor, breech birth, but I turned it. The baby's coming now, but we lost light." The miners exchanged knowing looks. They'd seen too many cave tragedies not to understand the urgency. Without further discussion, they followed Jack. Back through the tunnels, their lamps transforming the dangerous maze into a navigable path. Sarah's scream reached them before they saw her. Jack broke into a run, nearly falling twice, but refusing to slow down. He burst into the chamber just as another contraction peaked. "I'm here," he said, sliding to his knees beside her. "I'm here, and I brought help and light." He took a lamp from one of the miners, illuminating the scene properly for the first time in what felt like hours. Mary was there instantly, taking charge with the efficiency of a woman who'd helped birth a dozen calves. "The baby's crowning," she announced. Sarah, you beautiful fool, only you would pick a cave to deliver my niece or nephew. Sarah's laugh turned into a cry as another contraction hit. Jack found himself holding her hand again. The deputy's badge pressed between their palms. The miners arranged themselves with practiced efficiency, one holding light, two bracing Sarah's back, Mary preparing to catch the baby. "Push!" Jack encouraged, all his focus on Sarah's face. "Push like you fought, like you held on, like you trusted." Sarah bore down with the last of her strength. The chamber filled with a new sound, a baby's first angry cry at being thrust into the world of light and air. "A girl," Mary announced, quickly wrapping the infant in the clean shirt one of the miners offered. "Perfect and strong, just like her mama." Jack helped adjust his coat around Sarah's shoulders as Mary placed the baby in her arms. The newborn's face was red and wrinkled, her cry healthy and demanding. She had Thomas's chin, Sarah noticed, through tears of exhaustion and joy. "What will you call her?" Jack asked softly. Sarah looked down at the deputy's badge, still pressed between their joined hands, then up at the man who'd brought both darkness and light into her world. "Faith," she whispered. "Her name is Faith." The rescue rope burned against Jack's palms as he helped guide the makeshift stretcher, carrying Sarah and Faith toward the cave entrance. Each step was measured, each movement careful, as they navigated the treacherous path toward daylight. The miners worked with the precision of men used to bringing precious cargo out of the Earth's depths. The first ray of real sunlight hit Jack's face like a physical touch. He squinted against its brightness, realizing how long they'd been in the darkness. Behind him, he heard Sarah's soft gasp as she, too, felt the warmth of day on her skin. Faith, bundled securely in Jack's coat, chose that moment to cry, her first sound in full daylight. The noise echoed off the cave walls, a proclamation of life answering the mountain's earlier threats of death. "Almost there," Mary encouraged, walking alongside the stretcher. "The doctor's waiting topside, though from what I can see, your mysterious friend here did a fine job." Jack tensed at her words. In the urgency of the birth and rescue, no one had asked his name or story. But in the revealing light of day, questions would surely follow. They emerged from Thunder Cave into a scene Jack hadn't expected. Word of the rescue had spread, drawing what looked like half the county. Wagons and horses crowded the trail, and dozens of faces turned toward them as they appeared. The doctor, a grey-haired man with kind eyes, moved forward immediately to examine mother and child. Jack tried to step back, to fade away as he'd done so many times before, but Sarah's hand caught his sleeve. "Stay," she whispered. "Please." The crowd pressed closer, eager to see the miracle baby born in the mountain's heart. Jack heard their murmurs, saw the moment of recognition in some faces as they placed his. A young deputy near the front reached instinctively for his gun, but then Faith cried again, and the sound seemed to transform the moment. The deputy's hand moved away from his weapon. The suspicious murmurs turned to sounds of joy and congratulation. Someone started passing out. Cups of water and coffee to the rescue party. The doctor finished his examination with a satisfied nod. Mother and child both healthy, thanks to some remarkably skilled care. "Where did you learn medicine like that, Mr. McCall?" Jack said quietly. "Jack McCall. And I learned from a Cherokee healer who showed more mercy than I deserved." A hush fell over the crowd at his name. Sarah's grip on his sleeve tightened. "The Ghost Rider?" someone whispered. "The one who recovered the Henderson bank money," another voice countered. Mary stepped forward then, her practical nature cutting through the tension. "Well, Ghost Rider or not, he saved my sister and my niece. Where I come from, that counts for something." The doctor nodded slowly. "Indeed it does. In fact, he reached into his bag and withdrew a folded paper. "News came yesterday about the Henderson case. Seems the governor's taking an interest, particularly in the matter of stolen money being returned." He handed the paper to Jack, who unfolded it carefully. Sarah pulled herself up slightly on the stretcher, reading along with him. Pardon?" Jack's voice was barely a whisper. "Conditional. the doctor clarified, dependent on testimony against Henderson's conspirators. The governor seems to think a man who'd risk his freedom to right a wrong might be worth giving a second chance. Faith chose that moment to wriggle free of the coat's warm confines, one tiny hand reaching up toward the sun. The sight drew smiles from even the most uncertain onlookers. The deputy who'd reached for his gun earlier stepped forward. "Reckon we could use a man with medical knowledge in town, especially one who knows about helping difficult births, if you're looking to settle somewhere." Jack looked down at the pardon, then at Sarah and Faith. The deputy's badge still pressed against his palm, where Sarah had returned it to him, no longer a reminder of a path not taken, but perhaps a sign of a path yet to come. "What do you think?" he asked Sarah softly. "Think your Thomas would mind if I stuck around, helped keep an eye on his girls?" Sarah smiled, tired but radiant in the morning light. "I think he'd say some treasures are worth more than silver." The town hall had been transformed into a makeshift courtroom, with Judge Harrison's desk serving as the bench. Court documents lay spread before him, wanted posters, witness statements, and most importantly, the governor's conditional pardon. 2 weeks had passed since the cave rescue, but the room was packed as if it had happened yesterday. Jack stood straight-backed before the judge, cleaned up but still wearing his trail clothes. He'd refused Mary's offer of a borrowed suit, saying a man should face judgment as himself, not pretending to be something he wasn't. Sarah sat in the front row, Faith sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby wore a blanket Mary had made, but beneath it was still wrapped in Jack's coat. She fussed in anything else. "John Jack McCall," Judge Harrison began, his voice filling the crowded room. "You stand before this court with an unusual collection of documents. On one hand, warrants for theft and violence. On the other, statements of lives saved and wrongs righted. The governor's office has taken particular interest in your case." He lifted a paper, adjusting his spectacles. "I have here testimony from the widow Clara Jenkins, stating that you returned her mortgage papers after exposing Henderson's fraud. From Dr. Matthews of Cheyenne, describing your assistance with a fever outbreak last winter. From Standing, mayor of the Cherokee, vouching for your character and medical training." Jack's head snapped up at that last one. Sarah saw the emotion cross his face. He hadn't known his old teacher had spoken for him. "And now," the judge continued, "we have the matter of Sarah Mitchell and her child. A birth under impossible conditions, handled with remarkable skill. According to our own Dr. Weber." Sarah stood carefully, Faith still cradled in one arm. "Your Honor, I'd like to speak, if I may." The judge nodded, and Sarah moved forward to stand beside Jack. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands wanted to fidget but wouldn't allow themselves the motion. "I knew who Jack McCall was when he found me in that cave," she began. "The wanted posters don't let you forget a face like his, but I also know who he is now, a man who had every reason to run, to save himself, but chose instead to risk everything for a woman and child he'd never met." She shifted Faith slightly, and the baby stirred, blinking at the crowded room. "My husband believed that a man's character isn't shown in his easy choices, but in his hard ones. In that cave, Jack McCall made the hardest choice of all, to stop running, to face whatever came, to put others before himself." The judge listened intently, his eyes moving between Sarah, Jack, and the sleeping baby. "Mr. McCall, do you have anything to add?" Jack cleared his throat. "Only this, Your Honor. That cave, it showed me something. Showed me that maybe a man's past doesn't have to be his future, that maybe redemption isn't about erasing what you did wrong, but about choosing to do right from here on out." Judge Harrison picked up the governor's pardon, studying it once more. The room held its breath. "The conditions are clear," he said finally. "Full testimony against Henderson's conspiracy. Regular reports to the sheriff's office. No leaving the territory without permission." He looked up at Jack. "Are you prepared to accept these terms?" "I am, Your Honor." "And you understand that any violation will result in immediate revocation of the pardon?" "Yes, sir." The judge set down his papers and removed his spectacles. "Then there's only one other matter to address. Dr. Weber has formally requested permission to take you on as his apprentice, to properly certify the medical knowledge you've acquired. Do you accept?" Jack's voice caught slightly. Yes, Your Honor. I'd be honored." "Very well." Judge Harrison lifted his gavel. "This court hereby accepts the governor's conditional pardon. John Jack McCall, you are released into the custody of Dr. Weber for medical apprenticeship, with regular supervision by the sheriff's office." The gavel fell with a sharp crack that made Faith stir again. As the crowd began to disperse, Jack turned to Sarah. "Apprenticeship," he said softly, "a chance to help people properly out in the light." Sarah shifted Faith into his arms, the baby immediately settling against his chest. Standing Bear was right, wasn't he? About every life having a purpose. Maybe. Jack looked down at Faith, then back at Sarah. Or maybe some lives just need the right reason to find that purpose. Through the town hall windows, afternoon sunlight painted the scene in shades of gold. A former outlaw holding a newborn, a widow watching them both with quiet joy, and all around them a community choosing to believe in second chances. The property deed felt strange in Jack's hands, rough paper that somehow weighed more than gold. The small ranch wasn't much, just 20 acres on the outskirts of town, with a weathered cabin that needed work. But it was his, bought and paid for with honest money from his first month of medical apprenticeship. Previous owner practically gave it away, Dr. Weber said, watching Jack study the document. Said any man who'd risk his life in a cave-in to deliver a baby deserved a fair chance at putting down roots. They stood on a small rise overlooking the property. The spring grass was beginning to green, and wildflowers dotted the meadow where a few borrowed horses grazed. Sarah was there too, showing Faith the flowers, while Mary supervised from the cabin's porch. "Speaking of roots," the doctor continued, "that garden plot Sarah's planning, it'll be perfect for growing medicinal herbs. Standing Bear sent quite a collection of seeds with his last letter." Jack nodded, still sometimes amazed by how his old teacher had smoothed his path into this new life. The Cherokee healer's letters arrived regularly now, full of medical knowledge and quiet wisdom. "Never thought I'd have this," Jack admitted softly. "A proper home, a purpose, He trailed off, watching Sarah laugh at something Mary had said. Faith, now 3 months old, squirmed happily in her mother's arms, reaching for the wildflowers. "A family?" Dr. Weber suggested with a knowing smile. "That's not... We haven't..." Son," the older man interrupted gently. "I've been doctoring in this territory for 30 years, seen all kinds of healing. Sometimes it's the body that needs mending, sometimes it's the heart, and sometimes, if we're lucky, it's both at once." Before Jack could respond, they heard hoofbeats approaching. The deputy, Roberts was his name, rode up, leading a familiar horse. "Found this lady wandering near Thunder Cave again," he announced, dismounting. "3rd time this month." "Belle," Sarah's faithful mare nickered softly. Ever since the cave-in, she'd occasionally broken free from her pasture to revisit the site, as if checking that the mountain was behaving itself. "She's like the rest of us," Sarah called from the meadow. "Some memories run deep." Jack walked down to take Belle's reins, his hand finding the spot behind her ears that always calmed her. The horse leaned into his touch, so different from the nervous animal she'd been in the cave. "Speaking of memories," Deputy Roberts said, "got word from the territory marshal. Henderson's trial starts next month. They'll need your testimony." "McCall," Jack tensed slightly but nodded. "I'll be there." "We'll be there," Sarah corrected, joining them with Faith. "All of us." The baby reached for Jack as she always did, and he took her automatically, his free hand still soothing Belle. The deputy watched this domestic scene with poorly hidden amusement. "Who'd have thought?" he mused. "The Ghost Rider turned family. Man and doctor's apprentice. Former Ghost Rider," Mary called from the porch. "And technically he's not a family man yet, though Lord knows my sister's been patient enough about that particular detail." "Mary!" Sarah's cheeks flushed pink, but she didn't contradict her sister. Jack felt his own face warm, but before he could speak, Dr. Weber stepped in. "Roberts, since you're here, help me check that well pump. These two have a garden to plan, and I suspect some other matters to discuss." The older men walked away, leaving Jack and Sarah standing in the meadow, with Faith between them and Belle grazing nearby. The moment stretched, comfortable but charged with possibility. "Your sister's not known for subtlety," Jack finally said. "No," Sarah agreed, "but she is known for being right more often than not." Jack shifted Faith to one arm so he could withdraw something from his pocket. A small carved wooden box Standing Bear had sent. Inside lay his mother's wedding ring, carefully preserved through all his years of wandering. "I've been carrying this," he said quietly, "waiting for the right moment, waiting to be sure I was truly free of the past, truly worthy of everything you've helped me become." Jack. But maybe that's not how it works. Maybe we're never completely free of our past. Maybe we're just free to choose what we carry forward from it. He opened the box, the simple gold band catching the spring sunlight. "I know it's not much. It's everything," Sarah whispered. Then, seeing him hesitate, "Ask me properly, Jack McCall." He went down on one knee there in the wildflowers, still holding Faith, still holding the ring that represented both his past and his future. "Sarah Mitchell, you trusted me in darkness when you had every reason not to. You believed in redemption when I'd forgotten how. Would you trust me now in the light? Would you?" "Yes," she said before he could finish. "Yes to all of it." Faith squealed happily as her mother knelt beside them, the three of them together in the meadow grass. As Jack slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, Belle wandered over to nose at his hair, completing the picture of a family being born in the shadow of the mountain that had first brought them together. The family portrait captured a moment 3. Months after Jack's proposal, Sarah seated with Faith in her lap, Jack standing behind them, and Mary off to one side, all of them dressed in their Sunday best. The photographer had suggested a more formal pose, but at the last moment, Faith had reached for Jack's watch chain, and his responding smile had transformed the entire image from stiff portraiture to genuine family moment. "It's perfect," Sarah said when the photograph was delivered, studying how the camera had caught Jack mid-laugh, his hand reaching down to catch Faith's questing fingers. Thomas would have loved this. They were in the cabin's front room, which had slowly evolved from a bachelor's sparse shelter into a proper home. Jack's medical books shared shelf space with Sarah's family Bible. Faith's cradle, built by Jack's own hands, sat near the window where the morning sun could warm it. "Speaking of Thomas," Mary said from her seat by the fire, "you'll never guess what came in yesterday's post." She withdrew a letter from her pocket. "From his old mining company. Seems those safety improvements he designed. They're implementing them in every shaft now. There's a pension increase to go with it." Sarah touched Thomas's pocket watch, which now sat on the mantel alongside Jack's mother's prayer beads. "He always said the work would save lives, even if he didn't live to see it." "He was right about a lot of things," Jack observed, checking Faith's forehead with practiced hands. Her slight fever from the day before had broken, but he'd learned to be thorough in his medical observations, especially with family. About safety, about trust, he smiled at Sarah, about finding silver in unexpected places. A knock at the door interrupted them. Deputy Roberts stood there, looking apologetic. "Doc Webber's asking for you, McCall. Thompson twins are coming early." Jack was already reaching for his medical bag. A proper one now, gifted by the doctor, both of them, according to their mamma's hollering. "I'll heat water," Sarah said, moving toward the stove with the efficiency of a doctor's apprentices. "Fiancé, Mary, would you—" "Already getting the clean linens," her sister confirmed. "Go, Jack, we've got things here." Jack kissed Faith's forehead, then Sarah's cheek. "Don't wait up. Twin births can take all night, I remember," Sarah finished with a smile. "Just come back to us safely." They watched from the doorway as Jack rode off with the deputy. 3 months ago, such a scene would have been unthinkable. The former Ghost Rider and a lawman, riding together on a mission of mercy. But time and trust had worked their magic, just as they had in the cave. "He's changed," Mary observed, bouncing Faith gently. "Or maybe he's just finally become who he always was underneath." Sarah thought about the portrait, about how naturally Jack fit into their family circle. Thomas used to say that ore needs pressure, and time to become silver. Maybe people are the same way. Speaking of pressure, Mary said with a sly smile, any progress on setting a wedding date? The whole town's waiting to celebrate. Properly. Next month, Sarah replied, touching her engagement ring. After the Henderson trial. Jack wants everything fully settled before we make it official. Always doing things proper now, isn't he? Hard to believe he's the same man from those wanted posters. Faith chose that moment to fuss, reaching toward the door where she'd last seen Jack. Sarah took her from Mary, soothing her with practiced ease. He's not the same man, she said softly. None of us are who we were before the cave, but maybe that's what faith is, believing in what people can become, even when they don't see it themselves. Outside, the setting sun painted Thunder Mountain in shades of gold and shadow. The cave entrance had been properly reinforced now, a project Jack had supervised himself. A bronze plaque marked the spot where Faith had been born, the town's idea, though Jack still blushed every time someone mentioned it. Mary picked up the family portrait, studying it in the fading light. You know what this reminds me of? That old daguerreotype of Mama and Papa, the one where he's trying not to laugh at something she'd whispered just before the camera flashed. I thought the same thing, Sarah admitted. That's how you know it's real family, when even formal. And portraits can't hide the joy underneath. Faith settled against her shoulder, finally drifting toward sleep. In the distance, they could hear the town's evening sounds, the saloon's piano, children being called in for supper, the chapel bell marking the hour, all the normal rhythms of a life that had seemed impossible just 6 months ago. Real family, Mary repeated thoughtfully. Found in the darkest cave in Wyoming Territory. Mama would have loved that story. Oh, she'd have loved it all right, Sarah agreed, smiling, almost as much as she'd have loved Jack. The engagement ring caught the sunset light as Jack turned it in his fingers. He'd spent weeks secretly melting down and reforming the gold from his last robbery, his first truly honest piece of jewelry, crafted from the last remnants of his outlaw past. The local silversmith had helped him set a small diamond in it, saying only that some transformations were worth witnessing. You sure about this plan? Deputy Roberts asked, checking his pocket watch. They stood outside the newly reinforced entrance to Thunder Cave, where Jack had asked the whole town to gather at sunset. No, Jack admitted, but Sarah deserves something special, something that tells the whole story. The crowd below was growing. It seemed the entire county had turned out. Sarah would be arriving soon with Mary, who'd volunteered to keep her, occupied all day while the preparations were made. Even Dr. Weber had gotten involved, timing his house calls to create a plausible reason for Jack's absence. Places, everyone! Mary's voice carried up the path. She's coming! Jack took his position at the cave entrance, where lanterns had been carefully arranged to create a path of light leading inside. The townsfolk held more lanterns, forming a glowing corridor that Sarah would walk through. He heard her before. He saw her, that gentle laugh that had first touched his heart in darkness. Then she appeared around the bend, Faith in her arms, and Jack's breath caught just as it had that first desperate day. Jack, Sarah called, taking in the scene with wonder. What is all this? This, he replied, his voice carrying in the evening air, is the story of how an outlaw found redemption in the darkest place imaginable, with help from the bravest woman I've ever known. He gestured, and the townspeople raised their lanterns, higher, creating a river of light flowing up to the cave entrance. Sarah passed through it slowly, her eyes never leaving Jack's face. 6 months ago, he continued as she reached him, I came into this cave a wanted man, running from everything, including myself. But in here, he touched the cave's entrance. The new support beams solid under his hand. In here, I found something worth stopping for, worth changing for. Mary stepped forward to take Faith, leaving Sarah free to take Jack's offered hand. Together, they walked just inside the cave entrance, where more lanterns created a warm circle of light. I asked you to marry me in the meadow, Jack said softly, because I thought that's what you deserved. Sunshine and wildflowers. But, standing here now, I realize this is where our story really began, in darkness, with trust that came against all reason, and hope that grew like silver in stone. He withdrew the ring, its gold and diamond catching the lantern light. This ring. It's made from the last gold I stole, melted down, and reformed into something new. Something honest. Like me, it had to go through fire to become what it was meant to be. Sarah touched the ring gently, understanding its significance. Jack, Sarah Mitchell, he said, going down on one knee. I've already asked you to marry me, and by some miracle you said yes. But now I'm asking properly, in front of God, and this whole town and the mountain that brought us together. Will you help me build something new from something old? Will you let me love you and Faith for the rest of my days? Yes, Sarah whispered, then louder, yes. As Jack slipped the ring onto her finger, the townsfolk erupted in cheers. Faith squealed from Mary's arms, reaching for her parents. The setting sun painted the scene in shades of gold, as if heaven itself were offering its blessing. Dr. Weber stepped forward, holding something wrapped in cloth. Standing Bear sent this, he said, revealing a beautifully beaded wedding blanket. Said it was time it was passed on to someone who understood its meaning, that healing comes in many forms, and the greatest medicine is love freely given. As Jack draped the blanket around Sarah's shoulders, the town's celebration began in earnest. Someone started playing a fiddle, and tables of food appeared as if by magic. Children darted between adults, playing with lanterns and creating their own streams of light. Look, Sarah said softly, pointing to where the last sunlight hit Thunder Mountain. It's just like that first day, but everything's different. Not everything, Jack replied, holding her close. You're still the bravest person I know, still trusting me when maybe you shouldn't. Always, she said, touching the ring, that symbolized both his past and their future. Some treasures are worth believing in, even in the darkest caves. Faith squirmed until Mary handed her over, and they stood together at the cave entrance, former outlaw, young widow, and the baby who had brought them together. Below, the town celebrated. Above, the mountain stood witness, and all around them, light and shadow danced together, telling a story of redemption found in the most unexpected of places. The new pocket watch gleamed in the morning light, its silver case unmarked by time or tragedy. Jack held it carefully, remembering another watch that had marked a different kind of moment. But today's timing would be about beginnings, not endings. "Papa! Ready!" Faith called from the porch, now steady on her feet at 14 months old. She wore a white dress that Mary had spent weeks sewing, tiny flowers woven into her dark hair. "Coming, little one," Jack replied, tucking the watch into his vest pocket. The weight of it felt right, like the final piece of a long puzzle falling into place. Sarah waited by their cabin door, radiant in her wedding dress, simple but elegant, just like the woman wearing it. She held Thomas's old pocket watch, planning to carry it with her bouquet as something borrowed from the past. Having second thoughts, she teased, seeing Jack's contemplative expression. "Only about whether I deserve this much happiness," he answered honestly. "Good thing that's not your decision to make," Mary interrupted, appearing with the last of the flowers. "Now come on, you two. The whole town's waiting, and I didn't spend 6 months planning this wedding just to have you be late." The ride to Thunder Cave was familiar now, but today felt different. The spring morning had dawned clear and cool, perfect for the outdoor ceremony they'd planned. As they crested the final rise, they saw the transformation that had taken place. The cave entrance, once a dark mouth in the mountainside, had been decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Rows of chairs faced a simple arch, behind which stood Reverend Anderson, who'd insisted on performing the ceremony despite his wife's initial misgivings about marrying a former outlaw to a widow. But those misgivings, like so many others, had faded with time and proof of change. The gathered crowd was testament to that, not just townsfolk, but people from all over the territory. Even the territorial governor had sent a representative, though Jack suspected that was more about politics than personal interest. Standing Bear stood off to one side, his presence a surprise that brought tears to Jack's eyes. The old healer had traveled far to be here, carrying with him medicines and wisdom to share with his former student. "The circle completes itself," Standing Bear said as Jack approached. "The man who ran from darkness now brings light to others." Before Jack could respond, Dr. Weber joined them. "Speaking of bringing light, that new technique you showed us for treating fever saved the Miller twins last week, both doing fine now." The ceremony began as the sun reached its highest point. Faith toddled down the aisle, scattering flower petals, more interested in the falling blooms than keeping a straight path. Then Sarah appeared on her brother-in-law's arm, and Jack forgot to breathe. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Anderson began, "we are gathered here today in this place of miracles." The words washed over them as Jack and Sarah joined hands beneath the arch. Behind them, Thunder Mountain stood sentinel, its familiar face now bearing witness to joy instead of desperation. "The rings," the Reverend prompted. Deputy Roberts stepped forward with the simple gold bands they'd chosen. Jack's hands were steady as he slipped Sarah's ring onto her finger, just as they'd been steady the day he'd helped bring faith into the world. "I, Jack McCall, take you, Sarah Mitchell." The traditional words carried new meaning here, spoken before the cave that had first brought them together. When they reached in sickness and in health, Jack heard several people sniff back tears, remembering the dire circumstances of their first meeting. Sarah's voice was clear and strong as she spoke her own vows. "At till death do us part." She squeezed Jack's hands, both of them remembering how close death had come and how love had proved stronger. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Anderson concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was gentle but sure, Faith clapping delightedly from Mary's arms. The crowd's cheer echoed off the mountainside, sending birds scattering. From the trees, the celebration that followed was everything Mary had planned and more. Tables groaned with food, music filled the air, and children played games between the adults' feet. Jack danced with his new bride, then with Faith, then with Mary, who whispered, "Thomas would be so proud of all of this." As evening approached, Jack found himself standing at the cave entrance with Sarah and Faith, watching the sun paint the sky in familiar gold and shadow. "Mama story?" Faith asked, reaching for the new pocket watch that gleamed in Jack's vest. Sarah smiled. "Which one, sweetheart? The one about the brave mama, or the one about the doctor who used to be an outlaw?" "Both," Faith declared. "And the mountain story, too." "They're all the same story, little one," Jack said softly, lifting her into his arms. "About how love can find us in the darkest places, about how trust can light the way home, about how sometimes the greatest treasures aren't silver or gold, but the faith to believe in second chances." Sarah leaned against him, and together they watched the sun set on their wedding day. The new pocket watch ticked steadily in Jack's pocket, keeping time with their hearts, marking not the end of a story, but the beginning of one that would be told for generations to come. Behind them, Thunder Mountain stood unchanged by the years. Events, yet somehow different in their eyes. Its dark caves had taught them that sometimes the deepest shadows can lead to the brightest lights, and that love, like silver, can be found in the most unexpected places, if only we have the courage to keep believing, to keep reaching, to keep holding on until dawn breaks and we find ourselves transformed by the journey.